They tried to break you in front of everyone, but now they're the ones exposed as fools. Chosen one, hear me clearly. This was never about hurting you quietly. They wanted a show. They wanted to drag your name through mud, to make you look small, to make the crowd laugh at your pain. That was their ritual. Humiliate you, erase you, and feed off your silence. But instead of crushing you, they exposed themselves. They showed the world their true faces, and you stood there unshaken. This wasn't some random fight, some petty drama, or toxic people acting out of jealousy. No, what you went through was ritualized, planned, executed. They tried to make you the sacrifice on a stage built out of whispers, lies, and smirks. And the cruelest part, they expected you to crumble because humiliation has always been one of the most powerful weapons of control. History is full of it. Public stocks in medieval villages where people were locked in and mocked for days. Hazing rituals in elite societies where pride is stripped until nothing is left but obedience. Even in modern times, cancel culture and smear campaigns are digital rituals of humiliation, designed to break someone's identity without ever laying a hand on them. And you, chosen one, you were placed in the center of that same system. But here's the part that flips the whole story. You didn't collapse. You didn't vanish. You didn't lose yourself. Instead, you discerned. While they thought you were drowning, you were watching. While they thought you were broken, you were learning. You saw through their smiles, their fake concern, their staged pity. You knew their applause was hollow, their laughter rehearsed. And while they thought the spotlight was crushing you, you realized the spotlight was exposing them. That is what makes your survival so dangerous to them, because humiliation is only effective if you accept it, and you didn't. Let's be real, humiliation hits harder than almost anything else. Science proves it. Brain scans show humiliation triggers the same pain centers as being cut or burned. That's why most people never recover from public shame. It rewires how they see themselves. It tells them they are worthless, undeserving, finished. That's why it's used as a weapon in war, in schools, in relationships, in politics. But here's the slap in their face. You survived the very thing that breaks almost everyone else. You didn't accept their script. You didn't internalize their lie. You walked away with your identity intact, and that makes you untouchable. And thank you, chosen one. Don't forget to pay this message back by pressing like and subscribe, because it helps this truth reach more souls who are still stuck in these traps. It's our shared responsibility to spread the light, to wake people up, to remind them they are not crazy. Thank you for being part of this mission. You are not just a listener. You are a force standing with something greater than yourself. Now, let's dive back. Look at what really happened to you. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't bad luck. This was a humiliation ritual, carefully crafted. They dressed it up as discipline, concern, just a joke, or just a misunderstanding. But that's how the ritual always works. It wears a mask so people think it's harmless. Behind closed doors, they plotted how to tear you down in public. They wanted to see you sweat. They wanted to see you cry. They wanted to see you apologize for bleeding after they stabbed you. But instead of humiliation consuming you, it revealed them. Their cruelty was louder than your silence. Their malice was clearer than their lies. Do you know what really eats them alive? The fact that you didn't react the way they wanted. They wanted you to scream, to lash out, to confirm their narrative. They wanted the crowd to nod and say, "See, they deserve it." But you didn't give them that satisfaction. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was power. Your calm wasn't fear, it was strategy. You studied their faces, their nervous eyes, their desperate smirks, and you knew exactly what game was being played. And that calmness, Chosen one, that discernment burned them more than any explosion ever could. Because humiliation is supposed to end you. But your silence turned it into their embarrassment. Think about it like this. Imagine a snake that strikes at its prey but misses. The venom doesn't hit the target, it spills into the dirt. Wasted. That's what happened with you. Their venom didn't stick. It didn't poison you. It stained the ground around them, leaving everyone else wondering why they needed to go that far to tear you down. That's why they're restless now. That's why they avoid your eyes, why they whisper in corners, why they keep bringing your name up even after it's over, because deep down they know the ritual failed, and a failed ritual always exposes the people behind it more than the one they targeted. If your life were a series, that humiliation ritual was supposed to be the season finale, the grand ending where you disappear, but you flipped the script. You renewed the show, and you cut the snakes out of the cast. You kept moving forward while they stayed stuck in the same pit they dug for you. And now they're furious because you turned their weapon into your testimony. Remember this, the universe never allows false victories to last. They might have gotten a laugh, a cheer, or a headline for a moment, but humiliation doesn't stick to the innocent. It stains the hands of those who deliver it. That's why today their names ring hollow while yours still carries weight. That's why people look at you with respect, even if they can't explain why. Because survival leaves a mark, and yours is undeniable. Chosen one, you need to hear this. You survived not because you were lucky, but because your discernment was sharp. You saw through the mask before they could glue it to your face. You recognized the script before they could force you to play your part. And that clarity saved your life. It's the reason you didn't spiral, the reason you didn't lose your mind, the reason you're still here with strength in your voice. They tried to erase you, but you walked away, etched deeper into reality than ever before. And now, the same people who thought humiliation would erase you are haunted by the fact that you're still standing. They can't gaslight you anymore. They can't convince you it was all in your head. You lived through their ritual, and you survived it. And that survival is your revenge, chosen one. Every breath you take, every step you move forward, every truth you speak, it all reminds them that their ritual failed, and nothing burns them more than that. And chosen one, before we go any further, let me pause and thank you for showing up right here, right now. You didn't stumble into this message by chance. You were meant to hear it, because after surviving that humiliation ritual, your discernment is sharper than ever, and that's why you're still standing. So if this truth is already hitting you in the chest, let it be known. Drop a comment below with the word untouchable so the world sees how many chosen ones are rising out of the fire with their dignity intact. And if you can, bless the team behind this message with a super thanks. It fuels the mission to bring light to others who are still trapped in the dark games of humiliation. Whether it's 1 cent or 1,000, every gift is a seed that keeps this voice alive. Now, buckle in, because what we're about to uncover isn't surface level. It's deep, it's raw, and it will make sense of things you thought were just bad luck. Stay with me till the end, because if you're truly a chosen one, you'll feel the pull in your spirit to keep listening. Let's get started. Number 1, they threw mud. Because your light made their shadows look ugly. They didn't drag your name through the dirt because you were dirty. They did it because your shine made their filth impossible to hide. Chosen one, understand this clearly. Humiliation wasn't their random choice of weapon. It was their only option. Your spirit was too clean for the polluted games they thrived on. You walked into spaces where manipulation was the currency, where deceit was the language, and where loyalty was nothing but a trap, dressed up as a virtue. And your very presence, pure, sharp, unshakable, was the mirror they could not bear to look at. Think about it. Why do people throw mud? Not because the other person is dirty, but because mud is all they have in their hands. That's what they tried with you. They smeared, they whispered, they plotted little scenes, not because you were guilty of anything, but because they needed a cover. Your truth exposed just how fake they were, and that terrified them. So they flipped the script. They painted you as the problem, because if they could stain your image, they could wash their hands of their own filth. But here's where it gets interesting. Their plan wasn't to fight you openly. They didn't want confrontation. They wanted distortion. They didn't want to kill your body. They wanted to assassinate your character. Because if they could convince others to doubt you, and more importantly, convince you to doubt yourself, they'd win without lifting a weapon. This is why their attacks never made logical sense. They were never about truth. They were about perception, about smearing you until you no longer recognized your own reflection. Let me ask you, chosen one, did you ever stop in the middle of all of it and wonder, am I the problem? Did I do something wrong? Of course you did. That was their goal. They wanted to plant that seed in your mind, to water it with lies until you turned against yourself. That's the real cruelty of humiliation rituals. It's not just about the audience watching, it's about breaking the target from the inside out. They wanted you to carry their dirt on your back as if it was your own. And the sad truth, for a moment, it almost worked. You replayed conversations, you second-guessed your actions, you even questioned if maybe you deserved the treatment. That's how psychological warfare works. It's subtle, disguised, and polite on the surface. Sometimes it comes wrapped in concern, with fake smiles and backhanded compliments. Sometimes it wears the face of silence, betrayal, or even a handshake that hides a knife. And yet, what they didn't account for was your discernment. They underestimated the survival system within you, the part of your soul that refused to be rewritten. Because while they thought you were drowning in shame, you were decoding their patterns. You noticed the timing of their jabs, the smirks that slipped out at the wrong moment, the compliments that stung instead of healed. You studied them like a playbook. They thought the pain they caused would blind you, but instead it sharpened your vision. You saw who was genuinely for you and who lined up just to watch your crucifixion. You realized who stayed silent while you burned, and silence is always an answer. Now here's what makes you dangerous. Your spirit woke up, and once someone like you wakes up, humiliation loses its power. They can't humiliate you the same way again because you recognize the setup before it starts. You see the trap before it's laid. You hear the tone in their voice that others miss. And most of all, you are no longer afraid of walking away, even if walking away means walking alone. That is the power of discernment. It cuts through illusion like a blade, leaving only truth behind. Let me hit you with another truth they don't want you to realize. Nobody wastes time trying to stain a blank canvas. They only attack art that's valuable. Your spirit was too pure, too undeniable, too loud without even speaking, and that threatened their entire act. Your presence alone revealed their fraud. So what could they do? They tried to cover your masterpiece with mud, hoping people wouldn't see the beauty underneath. But mud dries. Chosen one. It cracks. It falls away. And what's left is still the art, untouched. That's you. Think about the irony of it all. They wanted to humiliate you to make you look small, but the more they threw at you, the more obvious their filth became. The crowd might not have seen it at first, but with time, masks slip. And now people look at them sideways. Now their laughter sounds nervous, their silence sounds guilty, and their stories don't add up. They tried to stain you, but they ended up staining themselves. That's the curse of every failed ritual. And don't forget this, the universe keeps receipts. Lies fade, truth lingers. Stains may cover for a moment, but time always reveals what's real. You didn't need to defend yourself because your life, your actions, your spirit speak louder than their smears ever could. While they wasted their energy plotting against you, you were being sharpened. While they performed for the crowd, you were being prepared. And when the dust settled, who remained standing? You, not them. So ask yourself, what does that say about their power? What does it say about yours? If humiliation, the oldest and most effective tool of control, couldn't break you, then what can? If they dragged you through public shame and you still came out with your discernment intact, then what weapon do they have left? The answer is none. They have nothing left but the bitterness of knowing you survived their best shot. That's why your spirit is more dangerous now than it ever was, because you didn't just survive, you woke up. You saw the game for what it is, and once you see it, you can never be fooled by it again. That makes you unstoppable. That makes you free. They can try again, they can whisper again, they can throw mud again, but every time you'll spot it sooner, and every time you'll walk away cleaner. Chosen one, never forget, they didn't humiliate you because you were weak. They humiliated you because you were pure, and purity is the one thing filth cannot stand to be near. That's why they attacked you. That's why they tried to stain you, but they failed. And the proof is that you are still here, with your head high, while they hide in the shadows of their own shame. Number 2, rejection. Wasn't rejection, it was the universe stripping the masks off your enemies. They didn't reject you because you were worthless. They rejected you because your worth exposed how empty they really were. Chosen one, let's break this down. What you went through wasn't rejection at all. It was exposure. Every fake friend who ghosted you, every crowd that mocked you, every hand that once shook yours but later pointed at you, none of that was random. It was the universe performing an X-ray on your life, scanning your connections, revealing fractures you didn't know existed. That humiliation ritual wasn't just cruelty, it was surgery. It was slicing away everything that couldn't go with you to your next level. Think of it like this. Imagine a body carrying hidden tumors. You can't see them with the naked eye, but under an X-ray, the sickness is revealed. That's what rejection really was. It wasn't the world discarding you. It was the universe showing you the sickness in your circle, the cracks in your foundation, the poison in the smiles you trusted. And though it stung like hell, it was precise. It was a cleansing, a reveal, a test of sight. Here's the irony. You thought people were changing on you. You thought, why are they turning cold? Why did their loyalty vanish overnight? But the truth is, they weren't changing. They were finally revealing what they had been all along. That sudden silence. That was honesty. The smear campaigns, that was truth spilling out in disguise. The betrayals that came so quickly, that was the mask slipping off. And your discernment, sharpened in the fire, started piecing it all together. Rejection is never random. It's a mirror exposing who could never handle your reflection. That's why, while everything looked like it was falling apart, something inside you was being rebuilt. You realized the loyalty you gave was not being matched. The love you offered was not being understood. And here's the key question you probably asked yourself. Was I wrong to give so much? No, you weren't wrong. They were wrong for being incapable of holding it. That's why they had to go, because what you carry cannot be placed in careless hands. Imagine this. You're boarding a plane that's headed to a higher altitude, but the bags under your seat are too heavy. The plane can't lift with the extra weight. That's what those connections were: baggage, excess weight. And rejection was the flight attendant saying, "This can't come with you." Cruel? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely. Because elevation requires exposure, and exposure requires loss. If the universe had let it happen gently, in whispers, in silence, you would have kept making excuses for people. But because it happened loudly, publicly, messily, you couldn't ignore it anymore. You were forced to see the truth. And that truth is brutal. You didn't lose real relationships. You lost masks. You didn't lose real opportunities. You lost distractions dressed as blessings. You didn't lose real love. You lost actors who memorized their lines but hated the script. The ritual pulled back the curtain, and you finally saw who had been standing beside you all along. Here's another quote to drive it in. The people who walked away didn't abandon you. They freed you from their performance. Chosen one, let that sink in. If they had stayed, if they had kept pretending, they would have slowed your progress, drained your energy, and kept your eyes closed. So what looked like rejection was actually deliverance. You weren't kicked out. You were carried out of danger. Let's go deeper. Why did it have to hurt so badly? Why did it have to be public, humiliating, loud? Because if it had been quiet, you would have convinced yourself to stay. You would have whispered excuses in the dark. You would have told yourself they didn't mean it. Maybe it's me. Maybe it'll get better. You would have stayed loyal to ghosts. So the universe ripped the bandage off in the harshest way possible, so you'd never crawl back. Painful, yes, but permanent. And that's why you are free. Imagine this: a house fire breaks out while you're inside. At first you panic. You think you're losing everything: your walls, your furniture, your shelter. But as the flames rise, you realize what's truly happening. The fire is clearing out the rot, the termites, the mold. When it's over, you rebuild stronger, cleaner, safer. That's what rejection was. It was the fire you thought was killing you, but it was actually purifying your foundation. Rejection is not the end of your story. It's the editing room where the universe cuts out the fake characters. Chosen one, understand this. Your story had too much noise, too many distractions, too many liars in the credits. Rejection stripped them out. And now the cast of your life is smaller, but it's real. And that's why your future is safer than your past. Let me answer another question that might still nag at you. If they were fake, why did it take me so long to see it? Because masks are convincing, because loyalty looks real until it's tested, because people are skilled actors when they want something from you. But humiliation rituals, rejection, betrayal, they are pressure, and pressure is what reveals cracks. Don't blame yourself for not seeing it sooner. Be thankful you see it now, because clarity is better than comfort, and truth is better than illusion. Imagine this final metaphor: a gold bar in fire. At first glance, it looks like it's being destroyed. Flames surround it, metal bends, heat rages. But when it cools, the gold is purer than ever, stripped of all impurities. That's what rejection did to you. It burned away illusions, it stripped the masks, and it left you standing in your purest form, refined, strong, unshakable. So no, chosen one, you were not being punished. You were being purified. You weren't being pushed out. You were being protected. You weren't being rejected. You were being redirected. And where you're going now, only the authentic can follow. The fake, the shallow, the snakes, the distractions, they can't breathe in the air of your next level. That's why they had to go. Loudly, painfully, permanently. And let this be the last quote burned into your mind. Rejection didn't break you. It broke the chains around you. That's why today you stand taller. That's why your vision is sharper. That's why your discernment is unshakable. Because rejection wasn't the end. It was the X-ray. And once you saw the sickness, you could never unsee it. Number 3, they didn't want you gone. They wanted you gagged and broken inside. They knew killing your body would raise questions, so they tried killing your voice instead. Chosen one, let's tell the truth. Your enemies never wanted you dead. That would have been too obvious, too loud, too risky. What they wanted was worse. They wanted you alive but muted. They wanted you breathing but doubting, walking but second-guessing, smiling on the outside while rotting on the inside. Their plan wasn't to bury you in the ground. It was to bury you inside your own head. Think about it. The most dangerous enemy isn't the one who attacks you with fists. It's the one who convinces you to silence yourself. That's what they were after. They wanted to disconnect you from your own compass, to fog up your mind until you couldn't tell right from wrong, truth from lie. Because as long as you were unsure, they could control you. Why waste effort destroying someone when you can just convince them to destroy themselves? Imagine this. A bird in a cage doesn't need to be killed to be defeated. It just needs to stop singing. That's what they wanted from you. Your silence was their prize. Your doubt was their victory lap. Every backhanded compliment, every joke with poison in it, every smile with a knife behind it, those were all tiny cuts designed to numb you. And you probably asked yourself, was I being humble or was I being erased? That's the trick. They wanted you to confuse suppression with humility. You thought lowering your voice made you respectful, but in reality, you were being programmed to disappear. This was never about embarrassing you once and moving on. It was about rewriting your identity so you would never step into your power again. But here's the plot twist. They failed. Because your discernment woke up before it was too late. That gut feeling, that whisper that said something isn't right, became your lifeline. You started paying attention to the energy shifts, the fake laughs, the compliments that stabbed. And instead of exploding, you watched, you observed, you guarded your spirit, you remembered who you were, and now the nightmare they feared most has come true. You're not silent, you're not numb, you're alive, and now you see everything. Number 4, your public humiliation triggered the alarm and exposed their secret network of control. They thought they were silencing you, but what they really did was hit the alarm that revealed their entire operation. Chosen one, let's not sugarcoat this. The moment they tried to humiliate you in public, they exposed more than their cruelty. They exposed the system behind them. Suddenly, people you barely knew had opinions. Strangers were looking at you sideways. Whispers came from every corner, smirks passed across rooms, and silent stares followed you like shadows. At first, it felt insane. Why does everyone suddenly have something to say about me? But then it clicked. Humiliation is never isolated. It always signals a hidden network. What you lived through wasn't just betrayal by one or two individuals. It was the unmasking of a cartel, an underground pact of gossip, manipulation, and silent loyalty to dysfunction. And the second you started moving differently, protecting your peace, questioning their fake rules, you set that cartel on fire. You became a threat, not because you hurt them, but because you stopped letting them handle you like property. Think of it like this. Imagine rats in the dark. They look powerful until you turn the light on. The second the lights flipped, your awakening, they scattered, screeching, exposing how many were hiding all along. Your humiliation wasn't a punishment. It was a spotlight that revealed who had been whispering, who had been feeding lies, and who had been pretending to be neutral while secretly enjoying your pain. And here's the truth they never want you to see. Coordination doesn't come from strength. It comes from fear. Why did so many suddenly unite against you? Because they feared your voice. They feared you might say something they couldn't bury. They feared you might pull the mask off the entire system, so they scrambled to isolate you before you could expose them. But in trying to bury you, they buried themselves. You became their mirror, chosen one, and mirrors terrify liars. So they used the ancient tool of humiliation to shift the attention away from their own filth. But instead of destroying you, they revealed their cult of control. You didn't just survive, you decoded it. And now you know, they were never individuals, they were a system. And without even trying, you cracked it open. Number 5. Discernment isn't a gift. It's the loaded weapon that saved your life. They mocked your suspicion as paranoia, but it was the very radar that kept you alive. Chosen one, let's be clear, discernment is not some soft personality trait you wear like jewelry. It's not a vibe, it's not a hunch, and it's not overthinking. For you, discernment has been a weapon, sharp, loaded, and always scanning. It's the difference between stepping into a trap and walking away untouched. Most people treat intuition like background noise. They notice it maybe, but they shrug it off. You don't get that luxury. You've been betrayed by smiling faces, stabbed in the back by people you once called family, targeted by sabotage dressed up as support. You weren't given discernment because it was cute. You were forced to sharpen it because survival demanded it. Imagine a soldier walking through a minefield. Every step could be the last. That's how you learned to read energy. You tracked hesitation in voices, tension in silences, the flicker in someone's eyes when their words didn't match their spirit. You didn't just feel something was wrong. You decoded the whole play before it unfolded. And that's why you're still standing. Your escape wasn't luck. It was strategy. They didn't understand your silence. It wasn't fear, it was calculation. That radar inside you has pulled you out of poisoned relationships that looked perfect on paper, out of opportunities that were really cages dressed up as blessings, and out of rooms where your name was already on the altar before you even arrived. And here's the punch they can't stand. Your humiliation didn't break you, it confirmed your accuracy. Every time they laughed, every time they tried to smear you, it only revealed that your spirit had already clocked them. You were right the whole time. You saw through the masks. You connected patterns before the evidence appeared. You knew without needing proof. Chosen ones don't guess, they know. And when you know, you don't beg, you don't chase, you don't explain. You move, quietly, strategically, alive. That's why you're still here, because your discernment isn't just awareness, it's your survival weapon, and it will keep saving you long after their games collapse. Number 6. They treated you like the enemy, because you were living proof. Their illusions don't work. They didn't test you to know who you were. They tested you to prove to themselves that you couldn't be real. Chosen one, let's call it what it is. Their tests weren't curiosity. They were desperation. Fear dripped from every move they made. Fear of what you carried. Fear of how your presence exposed them without you even opening your mouth. You didn't need to wave banners or shout truth. You simply existed with clean intentions, and that alone unsettled them. Imagine a counterfeit bill sitting next to the real thing. The fake doesn't look so convincing anymore, does it? That's what you were, a walking authenticity check. Your life proved healing is possible, that forgiveness doesn't always mean revenge, that someone can walk through fire and still come out unburned in spirit. And for people who built their survival on lies, fear, and control, your presence wasn't soothing, it was threatening. Truth doesn't have to expose liars, its very existence does. That's why they tested you. Not to learn, but to discredit. They needed to convince themselves and everyone else that your light couldn't possibly be real, that you were just another performance like theirs. But when the pressure came and you didn't crack, when you held your dignity while they stripped you of everything, they realized their worst nightmare. You were exactly who you appeared to be. You became the mirror they didn't ask for. Your calm highlighted their chaos. Your honesty exposed their manipulation. Your consistency revealed their masks. And because they couldn't bend you, they branded you too sensitive, too much, too deep. But those labels weren't reflections of you. They were confessions of their own weakness. Imagine this. A storm hits a house built on sand and a house built on rock. One collapses, one stands. That's what happened. Your spirit was the rock. Their entire identity was sand, and the storm of testing proved it. That's why they treated you like an enemy, chosen one, because you weren't just carrying truth, you embodied it. And in a world addicted to fakery, someone who can't be bought, bent, or silenced is the biggest threat of all. Number 7. When their shadow games failed, they built a stage to turn you into a spectacle. They couldn't kill you in silence, so they built a circus to distract from their failure. Chosen one, this is how the game always plays out. At first, they came for you quietly, whispered sabotage, subtle traps, strategic mistakes designed to make you stumble without them ever getting caught. They wanted you to bleed out privately, doubting yourself until you self-destructed. But you didn't. You noticed. You adjusted. You kept showing up. And nothing rattles an enemy more than a target who refuses to collapse. Think about it. What happens when poison doesn't kill its victim? The enemy panics. They start pouring it in louder doses, desperate for results. That's what they did to you. When their shadows failed, they dragged you into the spotlight. If silent sabotage couldn't break you, maybe public spectacle would. So they built a stage, slapped your name on it, and turned your life into their favorite gossip performance. They didn't want truth. They wanted noise loud enough to drown your voice. They exaggerated your flaws, twisted your past, and dragged your name through conversations that had nothing to do with you. It wasn't about facts. It was about volume. If they shouted long enough, maybe people would forget to ask questions. If they pointed at you long enough, maybe no one would notice the dirt on their own hands. But here's the irony. The circus they built to shame you exposed them instead, because obsession is hard to hide. When someone spends that much energy tearing down a person who isn't even fighting back, it reveals desperation. The crowd begins to wonder, why are they so fixated? Why can't they let it go? And slowly, the spotlight they tried to throw on you started reflecting back on them. Spectacle is the last move of the powerless. That's why you outlasted their circus. You didn't need to clap back. You didn't need to perform. You simply endured, and your endurance made their obsession obvious. The harder they pushed, the clearer it became. You were never the problem. You were the proof they had lost control. Number 8. They tried to drown you in shame, but you learned to turn the ocean into your training ground. They wanted shame to be your coffin, but it became your classroom. Chosen one, their goal was never just embarrassment. Embarrassment fades. What they wanted was suffocation. They wanted their words replaying in your head at 3 a.m., echoing louder than your own thoughts. Shame was their ritual, their weapon, their trap. because shame doesn't need chains. It convinces you to chain yourself, but instead of drowning, you adapted. Yes, it was painful. Yes, it was slow, but something inside you refused to collapse. While they pushed you into depths meant to crush you, you learned a different skill. You learned how to breathe underwater. Imagine being thrown into the deep end, where most people thrash and sink. Instead, you grew gills. You adapted to an environment designed to kill you. That's why you're still here. Shame was supposed to silence you, but it sharpened you. You stopped arguing with people who needed you to play the villain. You recognized gaslighting for what it was. You saw the twisted truths, the guilt trips, the setups. And in your silence, you leveled up. The same rooms that once triggered you became training grounds. Every insult became data. Every trap became a map. Imagine a diver who spends years in the deepest waters. When they return to the surface, storms don't scare them anymore. That's you. They thought you would drown, but instead, you became a deep diver. You can now read currents most people don't even notice. The tension in a smile, the shift in a tone, the game before it even begins. The shame that was meant to kill you became the oxygen that sustains you. That's why you don't panic when drama rises now. You've been trained in pressure most people couldn't survive. You no longer fear the deep, because you are the deep. And that terrifies them. Number 9. They wrapped the knife in love, but it was always a sacrifice ritual. They didn't hug you to hold you, they hugged you to pin your arms down. Chosen one, that's the sick trick they played. They dressed it all up in words that disarm hearts. Love, loyalty, family, words you wanted to believe, words that made you lower your guard. But behind the soft tones, it was never love. It was preparation, it was grooming, it was sacrifice disguised as care. Every concern was a leash, every favor was a trap, every "we're just looking out for you" was another rope around your neck. What they called loyalty was control. What they called family was a cage. And the knife they prepared wasn't steel, it was psychological. They weren't after your body, they were after your spirit. Piece by piece, they wanted your joy, your vision, your potential drained, all while convincing you that it was devotion. That's the ritual. They wanted you to thank them while they bled you dry. Love without freedom isn't love, it's bondage. And that's exactly what your discernment started to catch. At first, you couldn't explain it, you just felt it. You noticed how every act of help came with invisible strings. How every "I love you" demanded your silence. How their loyalty was always conditional, on your obedience, on your shrinking, on your willingness to sacrifice yourself for their comfort. Imagine a lamb being fattened, not to be celebrated, but to be sacrificed. That's what they wanted you to be, but you weren't blind. Something inside you refused. Your discernment started screaming, "This isn't protection, this is preparation." And the moment you recognized the ritual for what it was, the game ended. You stopped mistaking a leash for love. You stopped giving your power away. You stopped being the offering. And here's what terrifies them most. You survived the sacrifice ritual. You shattered their illusion. The knife that was raised over your spirit never landed. Because your discernment, sharp and unshakable, cut through their masks first. They wanted you drained, but you walked away alive, wise and untouchable. And now they can't stomach it, because you weren't supposed to live through their ritual. But you did. And that survival is the very proof of your power. Number 10. Your untainted spirit became their mirror, and they couldn't survive the reflection. They didn't hate you, they hated the way your existence exposed their rot. Chosen one, let's be real. The venom, the hostility, the blind rage they hurled at you was never truly about you. It was about the mirror you held up without even trying. Your spirit was clean, your intentions unbent, your presence untwisted, and that alone became a reflection they could not bear to see. Imagine a room full of cracked mirrors. For years they painted over the fractures, covered the rot with distractions, stacked masks on masks to hide their regrets. Then you walked in, polished, clear, unshaken, and suddenly all their decay stared back at them. You weren't their enemy, you were their exposure. They weren't mad because you were wrong, they were mad because you were right. Your honesty made their lies look cheap. Your light made their shadows scream. You didn't accuse them, but your life testified against them. And that's why they lashed out. Their denial was at war with your truth. To them, breaking you felt like breaking the mirror. But mirrors don't vanish when glass shatters. The reflection stays. You've probably wondered, why does their hate feel so heavy? Why so irrational? Because their rage wasn't logical, it was survival. They had spent years burying the shame you reflected back in an instant. They weren't fighting you, they were fighting what you revealed about themselves. And here's the part they can't erase. You survived. They tried to drag you into their shadows, but you refused to drown. Their spirits may have rotted in denial, but yours stayed clean, clear, and untouchable. And that's what breaks them most. You became the evidence they can't silence, the living proof of what they'll never be. And no matter how much venom they spit, the reflection doesn't disappear. It haunts them every time they remember you. Number 11. What they called bullying was really the brutal right that marked you for power. They thought they were breaking you in front of the crowd. What they didn't know was they were crowning you in front of the universe. Chosen one, let's strip this down to the truth. What the world labeled as bullying wasn't bullying at all. It was initiation, a brutal rite of passage disguised as social rejection. What looked like humiliation was actually the beginning of your rise. Here's the paradox most people will never grasp. Every great ascent comes wrapped in shame first. The deeper the fall looks, the higher the climb that follows. You didn't stumble into this storm by accident. You were built for it. You were coded to endure it. And that's why they singled you out. The public mockery, the smirks, the staged rejection, it wasn't random cruelty. It was separation. Ordinary people are trained to blend in. Chosen ones are forced to stand out. Most are content to follow the herd, play safe, and melt into the background. But you were never shaped for that mold. You were forged in solitude, sculpted for the weight of leadership. And sometimes the only way to mark someone as different is through rejection loud enough for the whole world to hear. What they thought was your erasure became your stamp. The scar they hoped would silence you became your seal. That ritual didn't shrink you, it amplified you. You leaned on yourself in a way most people never learn to. You built clarity in the silence. You forged resilience in the rejection. You found a strength that only comes when every hand lets go and you're forced to stand on your own. They wanted to erase you, but in the process, they crowned you. They didn't understand that humiliation can be an anointing, that rejection can be a signal, that the loneliness they threw you into was the very throne room they feared you'd reach. You weren't made for the crowd. You were made for the throne. And that throne is only discovered in solitude. Number 12. They branded you crazy because your sanity threatened their house of lies. They didn't call you crazy because you lost control. They called you crazy because you were the only sane one in a room built on delusion. Chosen one, that's the reality. The labels they threw, crazy, paranoid, emotional, delusional, were never reflections of you. They were weapons. Weapons designed to push you into the shadows while shielding their fragile illusions from exposure. They didn't brand you crazy because you were broken. They branded you crazy because your clarity terrified them. You saw through the cracks in their masks, through the fake smiles and staged kindness. You refused to play along with their scripts, and that made you dangerous. So they did the oldest trick in the book: discredit the messenger to bury the message. When they called you emotional, it was because your feelings exposed their emptiness. When they called you paranoid, it was because you spotted their patterns too early. When they called you delusional, it was because your vision stretched further than their shallow cages. Every insult they hurled was really a confession. They weren't describing you, they were revealing their fear of being exposed. Imagine a candle in a dark room. To the blind, it looks disruptive. To those hiding in shadows, it feels violent. That's what your sanity was, a flame that made their darkness impossible to ignore. And look at them now, silent. Their silence isn't power, it's panic. They know the truth has already cracked their foundation. They know your discernment has stripped away their camouflage. Their stillness isn't confidence, it's fear. Fear that your clarity will collapse the lies they've built their lives on. They wanted the world to believe you were unstable, but the truth is, your stability made their whole system tremble. And that's why you remain untouchable, because every label they tried to chain you with turned out to be proof of your strength. You weren't crazy, you were awake. And nothing terrifies liars more than someone who can see clearly. Number 13. They confused your silence for defeat until truth roared without a sound. They mocked your quiet, but they didn't know silence is the deadliest weapon in the room. Chosen one, they thought your calm meant surrender. They saw your restraint, your refusal to clap back, your decision not to flail in the mud with them, and they mistook it for weakness. They believed betrayal would break you, that mockery would rattle you, that pressure would finally force you to fold. What they never understood is this: restraint is not surrender. Restraint is strategy. You didn't need fists or screaming matches. You didn't need to match their chaos with chaos. Instead, you became an investigator in plain sight. Every fake smile, every contradiction, every slip in their story, it all went into your mental ledger. You weren't powerless. You were documenting their downfall. Silence isn't emptiness. It's a storm gathering its strength. While they scrambled to bury facts, those same facts kept rising like air bubbles underwater, slowly, steadily, impossible to hide. That's the flaw in every liar's game. The truth doesn't need a microphone, it just needs time, and time was always on your side. Imagine a courtroom, the guilty yell, perform, and flail for attention. The evidence doesn't shout. It just sits there quietly until it's undeniable. That's what your silence was. You didn't beg anyone to see. You didn't scream to be believed. You simply waited, knowing the truth would eventually surface, and when it did, it wouldn't need your voice to defend it. And now it's happening, through whispers that can't be controlled, through cracks in conversations, through patterns too blatant to ignore. Their lies are collapsing. And the best part? You never had to force it. The truth spoke without words, and it echoed louder than their entire circus. They thought your silence meant you lost, but silence was the proof you had already won. Your restraint wasn't cowardice, it was wisdom. Wisdom that turned their noise into evidence. And now, while their empire of lies crumbles, you're standing untouchable. Not because you screamed, but because you didn't need to. So, chosen one, you survived the ritual, and that means you now hold the blueprint to break the program. Every humiliation, every setup, every whisper meant to crush you has become your evidence, your training, your power. You're no longer just surviving, you're decoding, exposing, and rising. And the best part, the same tactics they used to bury you are now tools that prove you can't be broken. If this message hit you, press that like button right now. And if you're not already part of this family, make sure to subscribe. Your journey is proof, and it's only beginning.